Hi, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope everybody's safe, sound, and healthy. And yeah, after a break, I'm once again doing two episodes in a row. It's just, the thing is that all these thoughts that have been bombarding my brain lead to one way or the other all the same thoughts that I've already talked about. So it's this endless loop. For example, we've already talked about the weird things people say and do, the lack of social etiquette and mannerisms. But here's some more funny things that came to my mind about people, as in some of the more funny things that they do. And yeah, as usual, the minute I start my podcast, that's when people remember to start banging things around. Amazing. Okay, like, see, this is one of it. The lack of etiquette is when you have people who make so much noise, always at the wrong moment. I really wonder if it's just because they're so selfish and self centered, couldn't care less, inconsiderate. That's one of the biggest flaws in our society. It's one of the biggest flaws with our people. Inconsideration has expanded to such an extent that people are always thinking of themselves as the victim, that they forget that they're actually the perpetrators in most cases, you know. And they always seem to want to add insult to injury. They wrong you and then they insult you and then they make things worse. They lie to your face, they put the blame on you, they pretend as if you were blaming them, they never take responsibility. I've sort of touched on these issues so many times in so many different ways, but they never cease to amaze me. You know, as I said, people are extremely boring in their predictability. One of the other weird things that I've noticed is the new generation, which is actually born into technology and social media. Well, one might argue we were born into technology, but I'm talking mainly about IT, as in information technology and social media. And it's weird that the fact that even though they're born with this technology, they seem to still have no clue about social media etiquette. I mean, for example, the etiquette that dictates us in everyday human to human interaction. Uh, I feel the same etiquette dictates us when it comes to social media because, after all, hello, it's called social media. Social. So, social etiquette, social mannerisms. It doesn't matter if it's physical or if it's virtual, it applies all the same. So, one of the etiquette is that if somebody has written something uh, on their own wall, as it is. I would really term it as it is equals to somebody physically writing on one's own wall, which means that your neighbors and the neighbors' dogs cannot say or do anything. It's your wall, right? And their opinions don't matter. The same thing kind of applies in my mind to social media. So when you post something, it's your post, it's your wall, it's your property. So anybody who is actually trying to um, disturb your narrative by forcing theirs onto yours and negating yours, I think it's kind of rude. It's the same thing as somebody coming and saying, "Oh, why did you paint your wall pink?" And they bring a white paint can and start painting it white. It's your house, it's your wall. Who the heck are they to say anything? Who the frack are they to say anything or do anything? In fact, they can actually be put to jail just for, you know, initiating contact with your wall by trying to paint it a different color. So the same kind of applies, I think, on the virtual wall, as in their opinions don't matter. Your opinion is not something that you're forcing onto others. Why? Because your opinion is written by you on your own wall. So I think social etiquette demands that the other person can just silently disagree. For example, I see so many statuses, so many statuses on WhatsApp and Facebook and all, and I don't find it necessary to always reply to all of them. In fact, 99% of the time I don't. Okay, so I've seen it. If I like it, I'll like it. And if I don't, I'm gonna keep my opinion to myself. Why? Because I agree to disagree silently. That's social etiquette. Um, Similarly, another thing I don't get with kids today, them being born with social media and all, is their lack of savoir faire, you can say, concerning social media and the internet. I mean, one would think that they would be more savvy and more conscious than even our generation regarding their privacy, you know. But they don't seem to recognize privacy as important enough, and then that's why they suffer. We all suffer, actually. Even those of us who try to maintain some form of privacy within our online activities, we still end up, suffering because somebody would suddenly hijack our uh, account, or they would just manage to, because nothing is safe on Facebook. Especially Facebook is notorious for the fact that there is no safety, no security, no privacy. So your pictures, whatever you post up there, even if you post it for only me, which is, customized to the extent that only you can see it, that does not stop Facebook from letting anybody, or Facebook itself, access those pictures, and in turn to let them be used anywhere uh, in the internet world, I would say, in the internet world, in the virtual world. So anything and everything that you put out there, it stays out there, no matter how well you would later on try to remove it. It's like having a tattoo on your body. You have a tattoo, you want to remove the tattoo, you remove the tattoo, but it's still there. I mean, you see the remnants of it, you see the greenish, bluish, weird outline marked. Your skin is never going to be the same. So I think that applies here. So I think that's a lack of social etiquette that the generation has on their usage of social media is, to be very honest, uh, it doesn't make sense to me. I would think that they would be the first and foremost, because I mean, come on, they're born with it. They're the ones fiddling with it. They're the ones advancing it. They're the ones growing it, developing it. I don't get why they don't see the importance of the dangers, the lack of privacy on social media, and I don't see why they don't have a filter. I mean, I understand that when the internet began, um, basically it was a place for introverts. I mean, all these socialites and the hypocrites and the political whatnots and the media people, they all came in later. But essentially, when the internet was newly developed, it was developed for personal and private communication, and then it expanded a little more to people just airing out all their frustrations and venting out into the deep, dark hole of a virtual world where you expect that whatever you've thrown has just gone down the rabbit hole, and it's out there, but it's not really affecting the real world. So there was that distinction, which somehow doesn't apply anymore, because we seem to, amazingly, the new generation seems to act in the same way as we did, as if they're venting everything out and pouring it all out into this void where it's never going to bounce back. But I don't see, and I don't understand why they're making that mistake. I mean, in our case, as I said, it was something that we did for a reason, because that's how it was. But now it's not the same. Now social media it's actually practically colliding with the real physical world. So when you harm and hurt people on the internet, you have uh, the power to physically harm and hurt them. The etiquette of verbal abuse on face to face verbal abuse, it applies again here on, and especially when this is on the record. I mean, how can you say that it's not the same? How can you say that cyberbullying is not the same as physical bullying? It is on the record bullying. I mean, when it comes to real physical bullying, it's, I mean, you're lucky if you get caught on camera, and even then, there can be 1,000 different interpretations, and the he said, she said never ends, and you just can't pinpoint it, you know. But when it is cyberbullying, well, you darn well can. You can prove it. There's evidence. There's too much of it actually. There's ample evidence that this bullying was taking place, and then you can actually get the person who's doing the bullying. You can get the ID of that person, no matter how much he hides it, because everything leaves a trail and everything leaves a trace. So, you know, the victim and perpetrator can actually be much more clearer, contrary to popular belief on social media, as opposed to in real life, as in physical, real contact life. So the fact that the generation today has no filter and no concept of filter, and the fact that the thing that it doesn't apply on social media is where things have gone wrong, which, as I said, I don't get it, because they should be more savvy about it than we were. Um, because everything is leaving a footprint, everything's on the record. And I don't understand why the generation today is making itself so vulnerable to possible attacks. I mean, on one hand, you're saying that they're more sensitive and they're more vulnerable, and on the other hand, they're exposing themselves and their daily lives and their daily activities to the whole world. And it's on a constant basis. I mean, it's a never ending tension. A person like me, to be very honest, I've come to this point in life where uh, I just cannot tolerate anybody who gives me even the slightest bit of tension. I just can't. You know, I get to a point, because we were brought up that way, that we just had to keep our mouths shut and endure it. So that bad quality is still within me of enduring and, you know, tolerating. But then when I burst, I just burst, and then I go out unfiltered and I tell them exactly what I think of them. uh, I don't see how or why it's okay for the new generation, the young people, to expose themselves to this daily stress, this unnecessary tension. I think we have the right to live a life of unnecessary tension. And in fact, I think that is what we're all actually trying to do. We leave countries, we leave homes, we leave families to attain that peace. I mean, even in the Quran, you know, where in Surah Nisa, the fourth chapter, uh, in there's a verse in it where God says that, you know, when the angels will come to take your souls, then they'll tell you what was wrong with you, what was your problem that you couldn't even get yourself out of that oppressive atmosphere. If you was God's earth too small for you? Immigrate, for God's sake. You had the option of immigration. Why couldn't you leave? And then at the same time, uh, you know, the angels tell them that, in fact, instead of being rewarded for your so-called endurance, you're actually going to be asked about it, and you may even well be punished for enduring misery and oppression at somebody else's hands. And even if you tell them that we were living in the land of oppression, which was basically, it's in context of invaded land, but I think it sort of covers up all types of oppression. So the angels would say, that is when the angels would say, that why was God's earth too small for you? Was it not enough for you? Why didn't you just immigrate? Why can't you just leave? And then the next verse says, except those men and women, and except those old men and women and children who were not able to leave. In that case, we would definitely try to give them a better compensation in the next world. But it kind of puts us in sort of a dilemma, right? Where we wonder which category we are in. Because on one end, we say we have the choice. And on the other hand, let's be frank, let's be honest, we don't. We don't. Um, the Western world has really done a good job of borrowing Islamic rules and values and foundations and laws. And that's why they developed, to be very honest. If they hadn't done that, they would have remained in the dark ages, and they know that. At least their constitutionalists know that, their politicians know that, their lawmakers know that. But unfortunately, the countries that were colonized, they were stripped bare of their Islamic teachings and cultures, as I've talked about on various occasions and in various different ways. That has led us to be more colonial oriented in our laws and in our cultures, and more, uh, you know, pseudo colonial, or should we say partially colonial and partially our own. Uh, our own pagan culture, you can say, which had which sort of predates or postdates Islam, whether in whatever way you would like to see it. The point is that we seem to have left those values that were so important in order to build a nation. The Islamic Empire was the biggest, most developed, most peaceful empire for a reason, and that is because they followed these values, they followed these laws and these moral codes and these principles. And there was always a sense of accountability, and there was always a sense of guarding one's privacy, and that nobody had the right to attack. I mean, this law is actually an Islamic law as well. It's taken from Islamic law, which the Prophet had stated. Actually, the Prophet was styling his hair with you know, a, a hairstyling tool of that time, similar to a comb, you can say. And there was an acquaintance of his who sort of peeped in, and when the Prophet realized it, by that time he had finished styling his hair, and he called on to him, and he said, and he told him very pointedly, he's like, by God, if this thing was still in my hand, I would have poked your eyes out with it. So, what he actually meant to say was that anybody who trespasses into your private space, your house, or tries to peep in, and that now applies to the modern technology laws as well, because the peeping, as in, peeping into somebody's house, that means either physically or virtually, via camera, digitally, whichever way, as long as you're trying to cross that private space, the person whose space is being uh, attacked or crossed into, that person has the right to retaliate by physically attacking the stalker or the peeper. So, well, there you are. Um, that means that it cannot be declared as excessive force or unjustified um, force. It would be ultimately self defense and justified. So the fact that he said that I could poke your eyes out with it, that meant that it was legitimate to even physically attack the person who was peeping. So a peeping tom, a stalker who's trying to bug your house or wire your house, or anybody who's trying to install secret cameras, in any way, the encroachment of your personal space and your privacy, it is taken so seriously that you are allowed to physically retaliate and attack the person in Islamic law. So this is how much we value our privacy. It's for our own sake. It's for the sake of our mental peace. And so again, I don't understand why the youth today, being even more vulnerable than we were mentally as well as socially, why they would put themselves in that position where they are exposing themselves to a world where once everything is out there can never be retracted. I think we need to sort of educate them on these, because they obviously, it's only when something happens to them that they realize the the enormity of of such exposure. So yeah, but the thing is that it's not just them. Obviously, I mean it's our generation too. I mean look at and even the old people, the generation before us, they're always on their phones and they're always on Facebook and they're always, just clickety clacking and and then they complain about the new generation. I think there needs to be some balance. The older generation doesn't have that balance either, so they have no right to talk about the younger generation. But there, as I said, there are some mannerisms, some etiquettes that we really need to follow. And as I said, they're basically the same. And I've realized that we sort of have decided not to teach the new generation, the younger generation, social mannerisms, which is extremely important. Um, Politeness is extremely important. Uh, Also, the ability to understand no means no is extremely important. And we've, on one hand, I think the problem is that the older generation is so hypocritical. They say one thing, they do another. Whatever makes it life easier for them. So they keep changing it as it goes on, and they don't care. We have to care because when we set a rule or an application, it should be implemented throughout, without change. That constant change, that hypocrisy, that is what has sort of made the younger generation more rebellious. But I do believe that our generation is, as parents, they're severely lacking in teaching their children manners, which is extremely important. It's very, very important. Okay. And these mannerisms, these manners, these forms of etiquette, they need to be practiced on social media as well. For example, on social media, everybody thinks that they can get personal. Dude, like how in real life you cannot get personal with somebody, even on social media you cannot. You just can't. I mean, it's uncouth. Okay, you're just telling the world what kind of a person you are. If you think that because you're on social media you can say anything you want, you're just uncouth. Uh, and you're basically telling the others that this is who you really are. I think I just said that. So the point I'm trying to make is that the conversation etiquette applies. Because at the end of the day, when you're chatting or when you're commenting, you are having a written conversation. It's a dialogue. A dialogue is a dialogue, okay, whether it's verbal or it's written. And the same rules apply. You always have to agree to not agree in a civilized manner. You should never get personal with another person. Uh, for example, you say something and I say, oh, yeah, you have a point, but I think this way. And then you can say, okay, but I kind of don't see it that way. I'm like, okay, fine. I mean, that's the whole point. We're all different from each other. Now, do you want us all to be programmed to look alike and think alike and, all uniformity? On one side, you're always crying out loud for diversity, and then you want everybody to have uniformity. I mean, come on, just choose one, and stick with it. What is this? That's hypocrisy to me. Similarly, there's this other etiquette that I really don't understand how people who were born into IT and social media and smartphones and everything, how is it that they don't have that common sense? When you have your earbuds or your headphones on, always leave one ear free, okay? Even if it's partial, always leave one ear free so that if somebody is calling out to you, you know, you know, and always be aware of your surroundings. It cannot be possible that every single minute of every single day, 24/7, is a good time for you to get lost into your own little world. No, it is never a good time to get lost into your own little world, except maybe when you're trying to sleep late at night. Then you know what? Go all out. I don't care. But during humane hours, where there's a possibility of socializing with somebody, even if it's necessary socialization, as in with parents or with a group of friends or with family or anything, it just can be anything. For example, right now I'm making this podcast, right? But I have still an ear out there for in case somebody needs me, okay? And this is one of the reasons actually why I keep my background noises and why I try to make my podcast as natural as possible as well, and why I don't go for too much filters and I don't go for a studio like quality. This is one of the reasons is that first of all I like it to be natural because we're having a conversation. Secondly, it's because I like to keep an ear out for the real world, in case somebody's outside. Maybe the phone is ringing. Maybe somebody's ringing the doorbell. Maybe somebody somewhere is just going to fall down and cry. I mean, you don't know what's happening around you if you're going to get stuck in that bubble in which you've become both blind and deaf and mute. Because this is exactly what you do become. When you block both your ears, your mind shuts down to an extent. I don't know if you people have ever realized it, but your actual conscious mind, which is supposed to be alert to the environment, to the people around you and the space around you, that sort of shuts down, much in the same way as when you're about to go to sleep and your brain starts shutting down your ears. I think many of you may have noticed it, how your ears basically get half shut. That's one of the first things that your mind does, your brain, it does. Because the best way to put you to sleep is to put you out of the real world and its noises. So when you go a bit on the deaf side, you know, and when you don't have to listen to all the outside noises, that's when it's easier for you to sleep, you know. So it's the same thing. When you cover your ears with your earbuds or your plugs or your headphones, then you've shut down your mind to the outside world, and that, in a way, sort of impairs uh, your your vision as well. And it's because you're out of it. So even if you're not particularly seeing anything, so because what I've noticed, what the new generation likes to do is they just want to close their eyes. So they actually think that they can now go into a fantasy world of their own, eyes, ears, mouth, everything closed, shut down. So I think that is extremely rude, and it's stupid, it's moronic. I mean, why would you want to just shut down all your faculties 24/7? You're in the real world. Stay grounded onto the real world. So don't make people scream to get your attention. Always keep one ear free, okay, to outside noises. Always. That's a basic etiquette. Similarly, there's this other weird stuff that I've seen uh, with everybody now that has a phone in his hand. I've slightly touched on it before already, and that is you're all sitting together, right? I mean, there was a time when you would all sit together to have a talk. You would even shut down the TV when you have guests and visitors, or when you have a get together, when your friends sitting together. You don't turn on the TV, you don't turn on anything else, because anything and everything that is supposed to be a distraction can be considered rude, right? Because you're here to talk with each other. If you're going to turn on the TV, you're not going to talk, right? But now, yes, now we tend to turn on the TV even then, more for background noise and for stimulating conversation in case there's a lull. So I get that. But when you're really getting down to it, you will find yourself shutting off the TV again. That's a fact. So, why is it that you people are always on the mobile? I never keep my phone with me when I am entertaining somebody or when somebody's entertaining me. I don't. It's in my bag and it stays there. In fact, I even shut down, the Wi-Fi and everything. I don't even care to have the internet on. The mobile Wi-Fi is just off. Why? Because I'm here with somebody else. This is basic courtesy that I owe that person attention because that person is giving me some of his time. Similarly, that person owes me a bit of consideration and attention because I'm also giving up some of my time to that person. So that is what socializing is. But if we're just going to sit there and then constantly be on our mobile phones, then we might as well just not visit each other or not sit with each other. I mean, what's the point? If you're not there to have a conversation, why even bother? So that's something that I find particularly rude. And it's strange that the same people who complain about mobile phones are the people who are always on their mobile phones, you know. So I don't get that. I think that one should be able to balance again. Your mobile phone is a phone essentially. At the end of the day, it is everything, but it is a phone, and I don't see why you find it necessary to constantly post something or type a message or clickety clack here and there when you're actually supposed to be giving some of your time to somebody else, right? It's complete rudeness. It always was considered rude, and I don't see why it's not rude anymore. In my book, it's still extremely rude. So these are the weird things people seem to do, and it's even weirder because the generation that's born into this technology should have automatically sort of, consider all these things and know what's rude and what's not. But if they don't even have that much sense, then I really don't know what to say. Because this is common sense, isn't it? This is actually just common sense. So I don't know. I think it's basically, as I said, it's essentially a lack of consideration and a lot of narcissism. And it's always listen to me and look at me and it's me, and everybody's all about it. So we don't actually listen to each other properly, and we don't even want to. We don't even care. And everybody's so busy imposing his or her own self on others, and nobody wants to be imposed on. It's just it's ironic, is what it is, and it's downright rude, really. To impose yourself on somebody is just downright rude. And it's even worse when you call yourself a Muslim, and because in Islam, this is something that it's totally unforgivable. I mean, this is something even the Prophet was not allowed to impose himself. If you remember, God says it in the Quran. He says, "You are just here to give my message. You've given my message, and that's done and dusted. But you're not here to force people to believe in me. It's up to me now. It's between me and them. You have done what you came here to do. Leave the rest to me." Similarly, when in Medina, when all those people who had welcomed the Prophet when he left Mecca and he immigrated to Medina, all those people, when they turned into Muslims, so there were clashes in families because in many families the kids became Muslims and the parents didn't, and in other families the parents became Muslims and the kids didn't. And the Prophet immediately put an end to it. He was like, "Listen, you have no right to force your kids to become Muslims, and you have no right to force your parents to become Muslims. You, with all your heart, have become Muslims. That's fine. Do not disrupt your human interaction and your harmony and your family, you know, just for that. It's all in your hearts." So those who have accepted Islam have done so willingly. And the whole point is it should be willingly. So you cannot force another person to accept God or Islam unwillingly. It doesn't count. So, these are basic etiquettes. These are basic mannerisms that we seem to want to discard. We seem to think they're not important. But manners make a man. It's true. It really is true. Manners do make a man. Okay? It makes us who we are. And we really need to understand that the lack of ethics, etiquette, and mannerisms right now in the current generation is what is leading to a very, very rapid regression and destruction of civilization. We need to address it, and we need to understand that it's important. And it's not their fault, as I said again. It's our generation's fault. As parents, I'm sorry, but you're lacking. And the fact that, especially in our country, there is this really, really bad habit, this culture of family exploitation, and so it leads on to friends exploitation, and that leads on to individual exploitation, it leads on to societal exploitation, and then it goes on to a national level, because that's how it always starts. It always starts in an individual or familial way, uh, basis, and then it moves on to a societal and a national one. And that is the utter inconsideration and hypocrisy amongst our people, the selfishness, the me thing. It needs to be removed, because we think that we are, being a family when we're imposing ourselves on another person. So as a family member, that person has to take care of us, or but you're not. You're not. What you're doing is the exact opposite. If you really considered family, you wouldn't be burdening somebody with your problems and your responsibilities. If they can help, fine, they'll help, they'll do whatever they can. If they can't, you have no right to impose it on them. And it's really bad. It's really getting worse, because now there is so bad that they just pick on any one person, and then they dump all their burdens. And if that person says, listen, it's not my responsibility, it's not my job, they actually insult that person, and they actually act as if that person is wrong, and they are right, and they're the injured victims, and that person is the witch of the west. So we really need to relearn values as a society, and we need to reteach it as well. So yeah, weird stuff, always weird stuff. uh, let's see what more weird stuff comes up, and hope you all have a lovely, lovely day. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.